Welcome to the Rollbar Solutions video series. In this video, we'll be looking at how Rollbar can assist with the release process and help to reduce the amount of risk with those releases. So for this video, first we will introduce the problem that developers face this step in the software development lifecycle. Then we'll look at how Rollbar assists with that problem, how we can help to solve it. Then we'll do a feature review, talk about the features involved in this process, and then we will do a combination demo and sort of educational dive into those features. All right, so first up, the problem statement. So I'm sure anyone watching this video knows that releases are risky. And why is that? Well, you're changing something that is stable. You're changing the code that your users rely upon. And so anytime you make those changes, that's an opportunity for problems to arise. And if those problems do occur, especially in these higher environments when we're talking about releasing code to your end users, if they get into production, then they can impact a large number of end users and customers and cause a bad experience for those folks. And this is usually best detected early. So those first moments following a deployment or a release are typically the most critical to discovering and fixing these problems. So how do you begin to address the problem? There's a new software tool outside of Rollbar, feature flagging. That's one great way to reduce the amount of inherent release risk. And so teams that do have feature flags benefit from being able to toggle off faulty code without having to make new releases, without having to do a rollback or a new deploy. So if you do have a feature flagging tool, if you've built that internally, that's a great way to improve the user experience without having to go and make a lot of changes to the release process. But even for teams that do not have feature flags, Rollbar can provide a lot of value there. For both teams, insight into the problems that arise is crucial. For your feature flagging team, they're able to automate kill switches and things like that to help reduce the impact. You can use Rollbar and its LaunchDarkly integration to automatically toggle those flags. And then for teams that don't have those, you need to know how wide the impact of an issue is to know whether or not it justifies a rollback, that you need to go in there and make those changes. There are some errors that are considered tolerable that you wouldn't want to make a change like that for. So sometimes you may discover that a problem is lower priority and it's safe for the release. Whatever your goals for that are, you can say that it's not going to interfere with those. But for either team, it's very important to get the right information early and often. And so Rollbar can help to deliver the insights needed for these teams. Faster assignment and resolution of the problem is critical, reducing the MTTA, MTTR. Some of the Rollbar features will assist with that. Things like code context that can help you see the get blame as a part of your Rollbar item, and the advanced grouping engine powering the discernment of root causes as they come into Rollbar. That's how you can distinguish between your different items and know what the given cause of one of those may be. And with that insight, we're capturing a lot of information from things such as the platform, the host, the operating system. So all of that can help build a more comprehensive picture and can also point to other points of failure, things like infrastructure problems. Sometimes a Rollbar error may not have a code culprit, but it may have a problem residing in another area. So it's also helpful to identify those things. And as anyone that has been on the receiving end of a learning system can tell you, receiving alerts that can cause fatigue, especially when you're getting a lot of noise, alerts that are not actionable for you personally. So anything we can do to reduce the amount of noise and alert fatigue, that's going to improve the quality of life for those folks that are on call, the people that do have to react to those alerts. They'll have more faith that the messages they're receiving are valid, and they'll be able to take better quicker action against those things. So how does your Rollbar usage change your workflow? So customers that are not using Rollbar, they may be spending a lot of time before the release. There may be a slower release process due to the fact that they don't have as much insight into that post-release process. So they have to do a lot more rigorous testing beforehand, trying to ensure that those problems don't make it into production. But it's kind of a case where you just hope that they don't, because if they do, you have to depend on your other monitoring tools to alert you of those problems, and then you have to gather the information required to address or to ameliorate that problem. Whereas with Rollbar, your workflow changes. There's a lot more insight into that process, more automation. There's less for you to do as a person monitoring that release. One of the more common things that we see actually is for folks to just watch the Rollbar items page in the moments after a release. So that could be a way to also just keep an eye on things. So all of this giving you better confidence in those releases and more confidence that if a problem does arise, you'll have the tools you need to solve it, to fix that problem. And that all powers faster releases and more innovation. Okay, so now we'll do a quick review of some of the core features before we do a demo. So I'll introduce some of the features here. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on them in the slides because I like using my app examples, the working examples, better. So just to name a few of the Rollbar features that enable this workflow. First of all, the real-time nature of the error reporting. We'll see how quickly those errors are reported from my app to Rollbar. That quick turnaround time translating to better MTTA, of course. The environment tagging that's called out here, just knowing that you can distinguish between environments with your Rollbar reporting process. That's a config that you can change on the code side. We'll look at that. Deploy and version tracking, those two sort of working, not necessarily working together, but having the same scope as far as their visibility. They track the new revisions of code that we do see being deployed and any errors that are introduced with those new versions of code. Then we'll also talk about notifications. Those power a number of different tools, things like messaging systems and PagerDuty, as well as also powering the final feature listed here, the feature flag integration. Okay, so up first, just a quick glimpse into how grouping helps with the process here. So Rollbar has invested a lot of time into our automation-grade grouping engine, and that is a machine learning-powered intelligence engine that's going to take all of the different events that are sent to Rollbar and categorize them by root cause. We'll look at the item screen and show how that provides value. But ultimately, that's going to point to the root cause of a given issue. And with that information, that combined with things like the people tracking data that we receive, that can help to identify problems where and how they occurred. So just looking at the low-risk releases scope, there's a few things we could call out here. If we do see a new error in a canary deployment, then we could use something like our feature flag integration to roll that back, to toggle the given flag there. For the second example, if we see that our most important customers are being impacted by something in a new release, maybe we roll that back, or maybe we notify the folks that are on call. That's a P1 issue there. Those are the folks we want to have the best experience, and they are being impacted at that point. And then, maybe going to a lower priority use case. If you see that it's only folks maybe in one of those lower tiers of usage that are being impacted, maybe that just gets sent to an issue tracking system. That's not a P1 event. Nobody needs to be woken up about that, but we do need to track that. So the grouping engine making all of that possible. Otherwise, you're doing all of this investigation on your own. It's manual human investigation, which is a lot slower and more error prone. All right, so one of the features that we'll look at closely here, we have deploy tracking in Rollbar. So that allows you to see the different deployments made and track those. You can more clearly see how those deploys are working, if they're working, or if they've timed out or failed. You'll be able to see undeployed changes in that deploys menu, and with that information, that adds another level of intelligence to the items, where you can then also potentially see the suspect deploy. If Rollbar can identify where it thinks this code problem was introduced, then it will point back to that deploy as well. And then version tracking, this is a way that you can see which code versions at an aggregate level. You can see where problems are being introduced. Then you can also work to resolving items in the later versions, and you can actually do that with git commit messages as well. But version tracking, we'll talk about an example of sort of a health check script that can be used to trigger rollbacks and things based on the versions API and the info tracked there. For notifications, we have a number of different tools that Rollbar can integrate with. Each of these, this is an outbound channel. Rollbar sends information from the platform to these other recipient devices or recipient application services. So each of these, they typically have different purposes. We can see them sort of categorized here: the chat systems, the issue tracking tools. We have PagerDuty for the escalation. And then we do also have some sort of specialty integrations. The feature flagging, that's a pre-built integration with LaunchDarkly, so that's going to have its own special configuration in the web app, but that is going to be based on the notification systems, and it's actually going to implement sort of a layer over the webhooks that we use. So if the given tools don't match your requirements, if there's something else you need to do with these Rollbar notifications, that's where the custom webhooks could potentially help there. So you could send those to something like a Lambda function or some sort of Zapier listener to try to take custom action based on what you find in that data. And then just to briefly touch on intelligent alerting, the notifications that are put into your system by default, they don't really have any filtering. And that's how you can turn some of this alert notification system, you can translate some of that from noise back to signal. When you first implement those rules, it's going to be very broad in scope. There's not a lot done to filter or discern those items, and so that's where you as a user can help to improve that experience with the filters. We'll look at that in depth as we pivot to the demo. All right, so now it's time for that. Let's go into the demo and review some of the features we talked about. I've got a sort of a working example here with what I'm calling my mock deploy. So in the code editor, I've been making changes to my index.html. This is just a base JavaScript demo application, and some extra configs that I've added here are going to enable some of the features that I have. So I'll do the quick rundown of some of these in action, and then we'll look at the features that have powered this workflow. So just so everyone's aware, I did make a commit and a push right before I started recording this. So I do have new code that was just pushed out, and this would be the demo application where I test that. Before I test that, I want to do a quick demo of some of my CI/CD tools here. So I've got my quality check and my sort of deploy build here. So I pushed that code. So now let's quickly run this deploy in Jenkins. I don't expect any failures here, but you never know. Okay, so looks like the build's okay. If I look at the console output, it's pretty boring stuff. The one thing I want to call out here, for deploy tracking, you have to use an API call to notify Rollbar of the deploy. You're not able to configure deploy tracking just by making changes in the settings menu. this is a change required on the CI/CD side. So this is configured in Jenkins. It's not something I can accomplish just with the Rollbar tooling. But that is going to enable the deploy tracking, because I did a curl command there to notify Rollbar of this deploy. Now I can see it in my account here. So we have the one commit that was made here. This is video attempt number 2. Attempt number 1 was recorded without a microphone. So here, just some info about that. I'm linked over to GitHub. We could see more about this. Look at the repo itself, the changes that were made here, just as I prepared this second recording. So deploy tracking is helpful. We only see successful deploys here. You would see those that time out and fail as well. So all of that tracking on this menu. And because we've introduced a new version here, that's also going to open up the versions menu. Now I see this is my newest revision. It was reported by the deploy, but as of right now, there are no items that we see tied into this. So back to Jenkins just for my quality check build here. So this is a way that you can start to potentially automate your process here. What this build is going to do, it basically runs a couple of API calls against my project API there, and it's going to look for new or reactivated errors in the given version. So right now we see that there are none. The red dot is new, the yellow dot's reactivated. So hopefully if I set this up right, then when I build this quality check, it will pass. Okay, good, looks like it did. But then let's simulate someone using my web app here. So both of these buttons are broken. If I click them, then it should report errors into Rollbar. All right, so there's one, and there's the other. Just called it missing method 3 and 4. So going into Rollbar, I see them immediately, but if I refresh, then I'll actually get my deploy sandwiched between some of these, because that's where the deploy will also show in the items list, this allowing you to more easily track the temporal difference between the items that occur and the deploys. So between these two deploys, we had these two errors, and since I last deployed, I've now seen these new items that have popped up. So just looking at these, thanks to features like my code context, I can see that it was me that made the change. There's my git blame info. Here's the line of code where it failed with the ±5. I can look at a lower frame in the stack if I feel like I need to. And I even have this suspect deploy info here. So this is actually going to point back to the same deploy since that was the last change. And since I did make a code change around the impacted lines of code, that is what associating me back to this deploy with the following revision. So all of that built into the item reporting and the deploy reporting that I did. So I'm just quickly finishing up in Jenkins here. I would expect for this same job to fail now that I do have some failures in there. So build number 9 did fail. And looking at the console output quickly, this is a process where it's set up to fail if it finds new or reactivated issues on the given version. And so as it pulls the versions API, there is the version it looks for, some info about the commit. As I scroll down through here, in the new category, there are 2 errors. So that aggregated at the bottom, we see 2 new errors there. That means the build failed because we wanted to see 0. We wanted to see 0 new and 0 reactivated. So in this demo, I don't really have any automation happening after that, but this is something you could build into those automated notifications, into alerts, or maybe automated rollbacks. If you detect those things, build that into your release process. Automate as much as you can, of course, to try to reduce the amount of manual work. So just to quickly call out the environment tagging, did say that was one of the features at play here. So that's shown on the items menu. Looking at the code, I did say I wanted to show this. So a few things that are configured here to help with this process. The environment tag is configured by default, but I had to add in this code version. So that's got my Git version there. And then I also had to add in this server root value. And that's how I was able to retrieve the Git blame info. So when I look into one of these and I see this intelligent stack trace with all the extra info, this is not how it would look if I didn't have my integration configured properly. So we do have a code context guide on our documentation, but just to keep it brief, the server root value or the root value is the confusing part for a lot of folks. This is my stack trace here. I'm running this locally, so it's just a file. And I would need my server root to match up to that value. So the home repo that I use for this, my JS demo repo, there's no folder inside of that, so it just goes to index. And I need this path to match up sort of the home directory back to this path. So index.html is the top level file. So in that case, server root is going to be the mapping down to where that is at the home level. So below that would be index.html, the name of the file where this was reported. All right, so I'm glad to cover that quickly. And when we talk about grouping, Rollbar is grouping these items. We're seeing these as distinct entries that we can track. So as I cause more errors in one of these or the other, that's going to show me the total number as it appears here. And that helps keep my UI clean. We're not seeing the clutter of all three events here. We can look at all three of these separate of one another, but the grouping engine is helping to point us to the single root cause. We don't need to do 3 investigations for this because it's just 3 instances of the same code problem. So that's where the grouping engine provides a lot of value for that. Okay, so up next, just back to versions for a second. I do want to show that now there are some new aggregate stats shown for this version. If we click into this and do some investigation here, I see my 2 new items that have appeared in this version. We can look at the commit info here as well, but now we have the new items tracked back to their version. And so polling the API for this data was how our quality check build was discerning between a passed and a failed build. All right, up next we have the notifications. So as I'm taking all of these actions, as these events are streaming into the Rollbar platform, there's also a Slack channel that I've got open on my side monitor here, and it is reporting some of these new events. So just to briefly show that, I have 4 new messages that have appeared as a part of this new build that I've created for this video. So when I deployed the code, we saw that come through as a deploy message. Then for missing method 3, we saw that. So there was an item message that with its Slack actions, the special actions I can take here inside the Slack app without going back to Rollbar. So good utility there. And then the new version message here. So deploy and version, there are separate templates for that. And then this is another new item for the second one. So grouping, helping to distinguish between these and send new messages about each of those. And when we talk about intelligent alerting, that is where the notifications, it's up to you to provide a lot of intelligence here. We do have a new feature that's still in development. We're working on getting adaptive alerts released where we can help to reduce the amount of effort needed here by doing analytics against the item rates and things like that. But for now, you still have to control the different filters involved here, and that's a big part of how you can control your experience. So some of the notifications in here that have already triggered in the Slack channel, we have things like the new item message, new version, deploy, Those are the ones that we saw in that Slack window I pulled up. We do have some other options here, some of the other workflow items, like what happens to your item. It was resolved, reopened, reactivated. Every occurrence is typically a bit noisy. That's one you would want to apply some filtering to. But then for low risk releases use case, what we may do here is add some extra filtering to direct this to a separate team. Maybe there's a release monitoring team. So only for the higher environment, for the production environment, for those that are error or critical. And then there's other filters I could add here. You could say that you only care about a certain method. Maybe there's something that you are tracking against, something you changed that you need to monitor. All of this is, it's customizable to fit your use case. The path would allow me to also take advantage of any custom data that I was sending through and route alerts based on that. All right, so for feature flagging for the LaunchDarkly integration, I just have a separate demo for that. This is one of the pre-configured integrations, and it looks a little different from the others, but it is powered by the same types of templates here. So this is a new reactivated item, and we're tracking against what I have as my say hello button. So this is just going to be another simplistic demo. The one thing I need to do to get ready for this, I need to resolve this message. It's only going to trigger on new and reactivated. All right, so the use case here is that with this feature flag, this button is experimental. We don't know if it's going to work or not. And so when I click this, I have it set up to generate an error. And thanks to the notification rule here, what this template says is if I do see a new or reactivated item and it has this in the stack trace, if it says say hello in one of the methods there, then I'm going to need to toggle this feature flag in production to the off state. So it's currently on, I can see that here, and when it's triggered off, then this button will not appear on my page anymore. So clicking the button causes a new error to appear here. And so LaunchDarkly is pretty quick to react to that. The button is already gone after just a few seconds where I refreshed the page. If I go to the button menu here in LaunchDarkly, it's been triggered to off, and it was evaluated just 10 seconds ago. So looking at the history shows that 16 seconds ago, this flag was triggered off due to a reactivated rollbar occurrence. So that is the integration in action. It does leave a paper trail here in the flag history, and we can see I can continue to refresh this. It won't come back on until I manually trigger that flag. So outside of all the things that we did here just to show insight into those new errors, into the deploys that cause them, we also can feature flag these to help reduce that customer impact immediately. You can trigger those with LaunchDarkly and Rollbar combined. So all of that building towards a more comprehensive view of your release process. You can see when the deploys are made, the status of those, and that info can help to power further insights about your items. What deploy has caused that? What level of impact does this have across my user base? All of that info now available to you. All right, so additional resources, further self-guided learning. The Rollbar Academy, this video is a part of that series. So there are more educational videos available on the Academy. Our support team, of course, standing by to help with any issues you have. The documentation, we are trying to more frequently update that as of recently, so look for improvements to the docs as well. And the knowledge base, that is a more feature-specific set of articles and videos. Those are typically shorter learning exercises than the Academy. These videos can tend to be a little long. All right, thanks for watching. I hope you found this useful, and get out there and do some rollbarring.